Hey everyone, Repoze here. I've made Rogue and Darker since I started playing in Playtest 2. Since the release of Early Access, I was the rank 1 placing Rogue in all of the kill leaderboards. I was also the first player to hit Demigod playing Rogue, and I ended Season 2 of the AP system rank 1 overall playing solos on Rogue. I've been asked a lot recently, especially with the influx of new players, to make sort of like a build guide or just give some of my thoughts and spread information on how to build and play Rogue. And I figured I would make a guide talking about build, perks, what items to run, and what's good. I probably won't get into too much gameplay or strategy too deep into it in this video. And I might end up making a follow-up video where I just do a Rogue playthrough and I kind of share my thoughts as I'm playing the game and how to play and what to do. So the first thing I'm going to get into is the perks. I'm going to go over perks and abilities, and I'll give my thoughts on all of them and tell you what I think. So first I'm going to start off with the abilities. And first thing we have is Caltrops. In general, I would say it's not really a great ability, and that's mainly because it has charges. So you only have 4 charges of Caltrops. When you use all 4 of them, you don't have any more and you can't get them back. And the ability is okay. Even if it had infinite charges, I probably still wouldn't run it. But it would be way more considerable than with only 4 charges, because if you're forced to use it 4 times, like you just get into these crazy fights, you feel like you have to use it and then you're out of charges by the end of that. For the rest of the game, you basically are just down a whole ability, which is just really bad. And the effect would have to be really, really, really good for me to want to use an ability that has charges like that that are not replenishable. So in general, I wouldn't use Caltrops. Cutthroat is a really good ability. Depending on the meta and what classes you run into and what's giving you issues, definitely a viable option. This ability completely destroys most wizards and warlocks. Pretty good in the clerics. It's also just a generally good ability in almost any class, because disabling them from using abilities is really good. Definitely an option, and it's sort of preference based, and if you do take it, then it'll influence which fights you want to take and how you play the game. But really good ability. Hide. I pretty much always take Hide. This is kind of the core rogue ability in the game, in my opinion. This is kind of what the class is built around for the most part. Lets you go invisible. It says it lasts 8 seconds, but since Rogue only has 10 will base, lasts actually less than that. I think it lasts 6 seconds base. It was like, I think it's either 6 or 6.5. I should probably know that, but it's not actually 8 seconds in base kit. It's around 6. But yeah, really good ability, and it's only good because it's enabled by other perks that you equip with it. On its own, it's actually a pretty bad ability overall, but the perks that Rogue has that enable it make it good. Rupture, definitely a viable option. It's really good because it procs off of throwing knives and hand crossbow shots, which can make it very useful. I'd say in general, it's more useful in solos. Bleed and damage over time effects aren't as good in trios because people have healers on their team, but it's still a viable option even in duos and trios. It's overall a good solid skill. Next you have Smoke Pot. Smoke Pot actually is pretty useful, I would say, in actual fights, because the slow is pretty big, like the AoE of it, and it's a decent slow. I mean, it's 30 movement speed from people that are in it, and it blurs vision, but has the same problem as Caltrops where it has limited charges. So just for that reason, I pretty much don't consider it. The effect isn't good enough. Next we have Tumble. Tumble is kind of a meme. It does have some use if you're really slow, because it'll enable you to back up faster than, just moving away. But honestly, this ability is just for style points and it's fun to use, but realistically, if you're actually trying to win, I would never recommend running Tumble. And finally, Weakpoint, another really good ability, definitely an option in a meta right now where PDR, especially in trios, is really dominant. Weakpoint is really good, and the nice thing about it is it's not only increases your damage, but it's sort of a good team ability, because if you have other physical damage classes on your team, they're going to benefit when you reduce someone's armor. And yeah, overall really solid ability. And now I'm gonna go over the perks. So first you have Ambush, one of Rogue's best abilities. If you take Hide, always take Ambush. It's pretty much no question. The ability is, or not the ability, the perk is kind of just overloaded. Like, it just gives you so much. 10% move speed is insane, and obviously the extra damage is also insane. So yeah, if you have Hide, you run Ambush always, no matter what. Really good perk, and I pretty much always run it. Back Attack is really good when it works. The only problem I have with the Back Attack is a lot of the times, if you're attacking someone in the back, you're already winning because they're not looking at you, which means they're not attacking you while you attack them. That's not completely, it's not cut and dry, is that. But I would say overall, it's a good perk you can run. Although personally, I don't run it that much. It's definitely a viable option. Next, we have Creep. Makes you not make noise when you're walking, and Creep is really good in solos. I would say in duos, it gets not as good because you have one teammate making noise. And for you not to be griefed by their footstep body, you have to play away from them, which generally can be a bad thing. And it gets worse in trios, even worse than that, I would say. One thing I do have to mention is I think if you're running multiple rogues and they all take Creep in duos or even trios, triple rogue, then Creep is really, really good. But yeah, overall I'd say it's more of a solo perk, but it can be good in duos and trios. And in duos and trios, if you're running all rogues, it is really, really good in my opinion. Next we have Dagger Mastery. I think you always run this perk on rogue because daggers are just the best DPS rogue weapon. You can do a rapier build, but I wouldn't recommend it. I think it's just worse in general. And yeah, daggers just do the most damage, and this just makes them do even more. So Dagger Mastery is pretty much a must-take in my opinion. Double Jump. Double Jump is pretty situational. If you're playing Rat Rogue where you don't really fight people, I think this is an okay perk, but losing 18 movement speed in this meta is really, really bad. It's good on some maps, so it's pretty situational. I think on the Ice Caverns it's pretty good. And it was really good on the Ruins, but that map's not in the game right now. So in general, I would say Double Jump is not worth running. But if they bring Ruins back, or if you're like an Ice Caverns only player, you know, it might be a decent option. Overall though, losing 18 move speed that's just a crazy movement speed loss, and in general I don't really run this perk. Next you have Hide Mastery. Hide Mastery is a good perk, but it's not good enough in general to run over other stuff most of the time. If I had more perk slots, this would be like something I would consider, but it's just not really good enough, in my opinion, to warrant running over something else. Jokester is pretty good. It has a similar problem as Hide Mastery, where generally I wouldn't run it, but sometimes it is good. I would say if you don't run Hide, it frees up 2 perk slots from not running Stealth, which I'll cover later, and Ambush, which I said obviously you always run. And it does have some use in team play. The problem is the range is really short, but it can be pretty useful. I think Jokester is really good with Druid because their forms scale off their stats, and 2-all is really insane for them. It's definitely an option, but in general I wouldn't say it's one of the strongest perks. It's overall good though. Getting 2-all is never bad. Pickpocket I mean, this is just kind of a meme. It's fun to pickpocket, but in general I wouldn't take it. Not really that great. Unless you're the GOAT, pickpocket parry, I wouldn't run this. Poison Weapon. Poison Weapon is really good, in my opinion, but it depends on your playstyle, and it also depends on the queue you play in. I would say in solos, this is better than in duos and trios. The problem is in team play, as I said earlier, like damage over time isn't as good because people have healers. You could say in solos, you know, there might be a cleric where this isn't as effective because they can heal themselves, but I think poison in solos is really good, especially if you do double hand crossbow. And you can stay on someone, not directly on them where they can hit you, but you can stay close to them and keep extending and refreshing the duration with ranged attacks through a hand crossbow and throwing knives, and kind of bleed them down over time, which can be really good. So it's definitely a good perk. In general, I don't run it because I mostly play trios, and it's not that good there. But it is just free damage. It's not like it'll ever be a bad thing that, like, you know, negatively impacts you. It's just an option, and it depends on your playstyle and what queues you play in my opinion. Next, we have Stealth. If you run Hide, you should run Stealth. It's really good. It enables you to make aggressive plays and reposition in Hide. And this is kind of like the core of what Rogue is, in my opinion. I love Stealth because you can play mind games with your enemies when you use Hide. They think you're in one spot, you're actually in another. Stealth is just really good. It lets you make aggressive plays. And if I'm running Hide, I will always run Stealth. If I don't have Stealth, I'm not going to use Hide. Yeah. And I would say there are some people who drop Stealth because they just go full damage. But in general, in my opinion, if you're running Hide, you always have to run Stealth. I think it's just more enjoyable that way. It's more versatile and just a more viable ability when you have it. Next, we have Thrust. This is sort of like a meta conditional perk where if PDR is really common and dominant, Thrust is really, really good because 20% armor pen, it's almost like impossible to even build that much if you build on every single piece of gear, to put into perspective like how insane this perk is. 20% armor pen is really, really, really high. The perk is really good depending on the meta. I personally pretty much always run it right now because PDR is insane. And yeah, overall it's a great perk. Next, you have Traps and Locks. This perk actually isn't bad. I'd say if you're like a level 1 rogue, you can equip this as your first perk if you want, just to get a start and, you know, get some items. I'd say if you have all 4 perk slots though, and you aren't completely broke, this isn't really that great. You can just buy lockpicks from the marketplace, and identifying where traps are isn't really that useful. You can just learn where they are because they're static on the maps. They do highlight ranger traps, which can be nice once in a while, but yeah, if you have all 4 perk slots and you aren't like dirt broke, I wouldn't run this. If you're playing like a pacifist, like a loot only rogue where you don't really want to fight people, then I would probably run this because it kind of just saves you money on lockpicks. But yeah, this is sort of like a, if you plan on fighting people, I would never run this, but if you want to loot, it's pretty good. I want to give a general what I think would be a good perk layout, which I use in trios, and I'll just show you that now. So you can use this setup in solo, duo, trio. It's always going to be good, and you go Hide, Weak Point, take Ambush and Stealth always with the Hide, as I said, and then you throw on Thrust and Dagger Mastery to buff up your dagger damage. So this is just a generally good build that you can run in all 3 queues. It's really strong right now. It has no like super major weakness. You can fight almost any player with this. Even if they're high PDR, low PDR, you have good damage against everyone. It's just a generally good perk setup that you can rock. And you can definitely find success with this in all 3 game modes. I will say in trios, I think this is the ideal setup. If you play more solos and duos, you can swap some stuff around. In solos, you can definitely drop the Thrust for creep and kind of avoid high PDR players. You can also drop Weak Point for Cutthroat, and then you really avoid players with PDR, and you can kind of target casters and ruin their life because you have Cutthroat, which destroys them. This is a decent solo build. But yeah, in general, I think this build with Weak Point, Thrust, Dagger Mastery, Hide, Ambush, Stealth, really good. And I highly recommend running it. So that covers all the perks and skills, and I'm going to go into items. So one of the most common questions I've gotten asked is which dagger should I use? So the daggers are Stiletto, Rondo, Chris, and Castellan. And you can run any of these daggers. I really do think it is preference. Now there are stats on, you know, the DPS of each dagger. You can see like which does the most in 3 hits, 4 hits, stuff like that. In the description, I'm gonna link below the Rogue Guild Discord. They have info and spreadsheets on all these daggers, and like if you want to see the, you know, how long it takes to get a certain amount of hits off, the DPS on average of each dagger, stuff like that, it'll be in there. But I'd say this is mostly preference, and I think all 4 daggers are definitely viable. Personally, I rate Stiletto as my favorite. The damage is really good. The 3rd hit of the attack does a lot of damage. It's satisfying to use, and I like the pattern of it. But you can use any of the daggers if you like them. I would just test them all out and see what you like. My favorite, Stiletto. 2nd favorite, Rondel. Chris 3rd, and Castellan 4th. But they're all good, and, you know, comes down to preference. Another question I get a lot is, what would I pick for a rapier build? Like, is a rapier build viable? I would say no, because there are no perks in the rogue set that like enable the rapier to really like shine. While there are dagger perks that make daggers, which are already the highest DPS rogue weapon, even better. But I would always run a rapier for PvE and for some PvP matchups. So that's why I always have one in my 2nd slot. There's also the short sword. This weapon kinda is just like... There's a time when it was really good, but it's been nerfed a lot. And at minus 15 move speed and no perks that enable the weapon, I just would probably never use it. Even if I had a really good one, I would just prefer to use the daggers. The final rogue weapon is hand crossbow. I would say always run a hand crossbow, having that little bit of range damage is really nice. It has an armor pen on it, and like it's good to finish people off that are low, get some poke damage. You should always have a hand crossbow equipped, in my opinion, if you are able to. So yeah, that covers all the rogue weapons. Next, I'm going to go over which item base types are the best for rogue, and yeah, I'll just go down here, the equipment. And one thing, when I go over the equipment here, the order will matter. So the best, in my opinion, are the farthest left, and then the next best will be to the right. If there's a little gap here, like between the shadow mask and the hood, I would say it's a very big gap. So like, just, you know, for example, I think you always want a frost amulet. Like, you can use a peace necklace as the 2nd option if it's all you have, but in general, frost amulet is way better, and peace option, or the peace necklace, should be like an option where if you have nothing, like, you can just throw it on. And yeah, starting it off, best amulet, frost amulet, because it scales the true physical damage with the rarity. So a legendary one has 4 true physical damage, and the most true fizz a necklace can roll other than the frost amulet is just 1. So if you're not using this, I would use the peace neck with 1 true fizz damage, but in general, I would say you just want frost amulet no matter what. And you want to get a high rarity one if you can. Next, we have rings. I like the Ring of Courage the most, just because strength is a really good stat on rogue, and he has kind of low base strength, so getting that up is really nice. One thing I should mention is you want to be at least 15 strength on rogue, because each point below 15 you have negative physical damage bonus, and each point of strength up to 15 is more valuable than each point after. You basically gain more damage going from 10 to 15 than you gain from 15 to 20. That's why I really value strength. Also, just getting HP and damage on rogue is really nice, because you're a melee, you know, melee range class, so you need some health and some damage. So for rings, I would say the best, Ring of Courage, Ring of Finesse, really good if you're lacking dex, and Ring of Quickness if you need a little bit more speed is good. I would say the Ring of Vitality, you can run it for sure. Definitely a decent option, but in general on rogue, I prefer damage and speed over health. If your build is really low on health, then a Ring of Vitality can be a good option, but I prefer to run these 3 usually. For the hat, you should only run Shadow Mask, realistically. Shadow Mask is really good. It has no move speed penalty. You actually gain move speed always if you wear one of these, which is really nice. And yeah, it has agi dex strength. Say it's just the best hat overall. If not this, Shadow Hood is like fine. It has strength base, but you lose move speed, and I almost never wear a Shadow Hood. I mean, overall the mask is just way better. Next, we have cloaks. Kind of the same story as the jewelry, but yeah, I prefer strength the most. Dex is good, especially if you're low on action speed. Movement speed is never bad. And then you can go for the health option if you don't have that much health, but in general, yeah, I prefer to get more damage on the rogue. Coming down to chest pieces, the best chest piece is the Wanderer attire because you only lose 4 move speed and the Dex base gives you better DPS, which is really nice. The doublet is also really good, but you just lose 1 more movement speed for a little bit of armor, which doesn't really matter too much on the rogue. And if you're not using either of those, the Adventure Tunic's pretty good because the move speed penalty is really low and it has a health base, which, you know, is pretty good. If you're not using any of these 3, you can go Marauder. In general, though, I don't use Marauder unless I have a really insane one. These 3 are usually going to be better. After that, we have gloves. Riveted gloves and reinforced are really the only options, which is, you know, strength base or vig base. You got more damage, riveted gloves, obviously, more health, reinforced. As I've been saying, in general, I just want more damage, and, you know, strength also gives health, so it's a nice little balance here in the riveted gloves. You can use leather gloves if you get a really insane pair, but in general, I very rarely use these. I would just stick to these 2. For pants, there's pretty much only 2 options. It's loose trousers and cloth pants. I've been kind of mixed up between these. I mean, it's kind of hard to choose. It's basically either do you want more move speed or more DPS, and you know that's how you decide which one you pick. Lately, I've been liking loose trousers more, but they're both really good. And if I get a good pair of either one, I'm always going to be happy. Finally, we have boots. I'd say the best boots in general are Lightfoot, just because the base move speed scales, and move speed is a really, really good stat. Being really fast on rogue is nice. You know, there's also the DPS options, which are adventure boots and heavy boots. I like adventure boots more than heavy boots, though, because the base movement speed is 6 on the adventure, and then only 4 on heavy boots of all rarities. So even though they're both DPS boots, the adventure boots just give you that little bit more movement speed base, which is pretty nice. Lace turn shoe are also a decent option, but they're kind of just a worse Lightfoot. They do give you a little bit of action speed and regular interaction speed, but that's not as valuable as just the overall move speed increase that Lightfoot boots will give you. And then there's rugged boots. It's the same story, you know, they just give you health, which is nice, but in general I want more damage. They're good if you get like a really insane pair, like if they roll double move speed and then, you know, damage on top of that, like 2 dex or 2 strength, then it's definitely an option. But it's an option that normally I don't opt into. And yeah, as you can kind of see, since it's sort of from best left to right, the general set that I would run would be Frost Amulet, Courage Ring, Shadow Mask, Tattered Cloak, Wanderer Attire, Riveted Gloves, Loose Trousers, and Lightfoot Boots. That's what my main set that I have on right now is, with a Stiletto main hand and Rapier Hand Crossbow in my second slot. Some people ask me why do I not dual wield, and that's because dual wielding pretty much has no benefit in this game. The only benefit realistically is that if I cripple Rondel, and let's say this had 1 weapon damage, my Stiletto would also benefit from the +1 weapon damage on the Rondel. So yeah, I'm kind of just giving up 10 move speed for 1 more damage, which, yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. So I would in general say it's never worth dual wielding unless you're going dagger plus hand crossbow. Definitely a viable build, but dual wielding daggers is not really a viable strategy, sadly. At least right now. So that's all the item bases, and I'm going to talk about the stats that you want on the items. And I'll just go in order of most important to least important. So I would say the #1 most important stat is getting damage on jewelry, so neck, rings, and gloves and cloak. Those are the only items that can roll the plus damage modifier, so either 1 true or 1 additional physical damage. And that is the most important stat you can get. True damage is better than additional damage in 99% of cases. So in general, you would prefer true damage, but additional is fine if it's all you have. And that is the #1 most important stat roll on your gear. After that, the next most important thing is getting movement speed on your boots. So there's 2 movement speed rolls on boots. It's move speed bonus and additional move speed. So you can get +5 flat move speed or 1.5%, which is about 5 flat move speed. Those are the 2 best rolls on the boots that you want to get. And yeah, so most important, damage on jewelry, gloves, cloak. Second most important, move speed on the boots. The third most important stat priority is getting 6 health on your necklace, your chest, and your legs. And the reason for this is because the health roll on these items is kind of just like skewed out of balance. Like the amount of health that you can get on a roll for these items is just it's just too high. It's just like 6. And the reason that it's so good is because if you look at this item, right, it has 2 agility, 6 health. They're both max rolls for the item on my chest piece. And then my gloves have 2 agility, and they can only roll 3 health if I get a health roll. So as you can see, I can roll double health on the chest, the legs, and the necklace. So yeah, that's the third best roll. Once you have those sorted, so damage on the jewelry, gloves, cloak, move speed on the boots, health +6 ideally on necklace, chest, and legs. After that, you just want to focus on generally good stats. So I'd say the best stats to get in general are strength, agility, dexterity, vigor, and then past that you can get flat action speed, fizz power is really good, and yeah, health. And yeah, that's pretty much the stat prio for the items. I can show you my kit just to show you general what's really good. Oh yeah, I should also mention on the weapons, I didn't mention this, but I would say an equally important role to getting the true damage on these items is getting 1 weapon damage on your weapon. And then after that, armor pen, fizz power, and health are all good rolls. So yeah, I can just hover my gear here to see. This is one of my best sets that I've had this wipe, and I'll just show you what a really good rogue set kind of looks like. So you want your dagger to be highest rarity possible, ideally, you know, legendary or unique, I guess, with weapon damage on it. Then you want a legendary frost amulet for the most amount of damage with a health roll, ideally. Get some rings with true damage on them and other good rolls like armor pen, fizz power, health. Gloves with, you know, of course the damage, and then some agility. Cloak. You want the true damage, then I have armor pen, action speed. Then, yep, on my chest, it's health, agility, legs, health, dex, vig. On the mask, health and armor pen is really good roll. Boots and movement speed. And, yep, on the other weapons, you know, just weapon damage is fine. Or high rarity for more base damage. And that's what a generally really good rogue set will look like. And my stats with this set, you can see, are 326 movement speed with no weapon out, 12 fizz power, and 25 action speed. I get asked a decent amount what are some good comps for rogue. And for duos and trios in general, rogue works best with either other rogues, because you can stack up the creep bonus and also jump people together. And also sort of the misfit classes that don't really fit into traditional buff ball comps. So I would say the best rogue comps for duo, either you go rogue warlock is good, rogue wizard can work, and rogue ranger is also pretty good. And for trios, I think you want to pair rogue with either obviously 2 more rogues, or you can go like rogue ranger, you can go rogue ranger warlock, rogue druid warlock. You can throw in I think wizard is pretty decent, so rogue wizard warlock, rogue wizard ranger. But in general, I think it's pretty good to play rogue with classes that are self-sufficient. I think a really good comp is rogue druid warlock, and another one is rogue ranger druid, just for ideas for comps. But the thing is, in rogue and team play, you kind of have to play selfish, and you need to play in a way where you're not going to be stuck and forced to fight in a bad spot. Which is why it's really good to either play with other rogues, play with druids who can fend for themselves as well. Warlock is pretty good at that, and ranger can do fine as well. One final thing I want to cover is people ask me about like what's the best like racial bonus. And it doesn't really matter because they try to balance them out. It's like you gain a stat and you lose other stats. I like the Frost Skeleton because it gives you weapon damage, but losing 3 move speed is pretty, it's pretty hefty. In general, I'd say like the racial bonus doesn't really matter, but the Frost Skeleton is cool because I get a little hat when I wear it. Before that, I was using Orc because I like the strength, a little bit more damage for a move speed loss. But yeah, the skins don't really matter. In general, it's kind of just about the drip. I'd say Lizardmen and Lycan are definitely not really options though, because you lose the ability to wear the Shadow Mask, which is one of the best hat pieces in the game. And yeah, that pretty much covers my my build and perk guide for Rogue right now. If everything gets changed, maybe I'll have to make a new one with updated info. But yeah, I didn't really go over gameplay in this. I think I'm gonna upload a some gameplay, like a gameplay video, and kind of give you my thoughts on what I'm thinking, how I'm gonna play. Sort of put you into my mindset when I'm actually playing the game, with these builds. To explain more strategy and stuff within the game. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.